So now we get into our last segment where we're going to look at the peripheral nervous system. We already looked at the central nervous system, we looked at the brain and the spinal cord. Now let's take a look at what's coming off of the central nervous system that's going to join up with all the various body parts we have. There's a few places that we can kind of break things down. We have the cranial nerves, the spinal nerves, ganglia, and we can divide it into two systems, the somatic and the autonomic divisions. We have 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and cranial nerves serve to conduct impulses to and from the brain directly. Spinal nerves, of which we have 31 pairs, are going to communicate directly with the spinal cord. And then for the two systems, we have the somatic and the autonomic divisions, and we'll go into each one into some level of detail. Let's look at a nerve just in general. Now, we're not going to break down the anatomy of a nerve. If you're going into your anatomy class next, you'll have a chance to do this. But we just kind of want to see how we're connecting together. We have the brain and the spinal cord from the central nervous system, and all of these nerves branching off as part of the peripheral nervous system. One single nerve fiber is just a small piece of these nerves. Multiple of these fibers will be bundled together into a bundle, and then multiple bundles will be forming the entire nerve itself. And we notice these nerves aren't alone. There's blood vessels running along with it, right? Because we're going to need things like oxygen, nutrients, and we're going to have waste that needs to be picked up. So having some blood flow there, it's helpful. Let's look at the cranial nerves first. Now, I'm not going to make you memorize all 12 pairs, but there are some that we do want to pay attention to. Let's mainly pay attention to cranial nerves 1 and 2. So cranial nerve 1 right here is the olfactory bulb. This is going to be your sense of smell. And then cranial nerve number 2 is the optic nerve, which is going to run from the eyeballs. Again, there are 10 other pairs, but I'm not going to make you memorize them. Just know what a cranial nerve is. Know that it is a nerve that runs directly to the brain. And these first two would be some points of interest that you can take. Let's get into the divisions now. We have the somatic and we have the autonomic divisions. Let's look at somatic first. Now, this somatic term might sound a little familiar because we've seen something similar in the past. We've seen somatosensory in one of the last videos we had. So somatic, sounding like somatosensory, is going to have to do with the skin and the muscles. And primarily what we're looking at when we're looking at the somatic division is the reflex. Let's look at a reflex. So a reflex is a way for you to react to some sort of stimulus very quickly without having to get the brain involved. Let's look at the pathway here. So we have some skin here and some flesh, and there's a pin. Ooh, it pokes into that flesh. That's gonna hurt, right? We have these free nerve endings that are gonna detect that damage and are gonna send that information along a sensory neuron. That sensory neuron passes information to the spinal cord. Now, normally the spinal cord would take that information up to the brain, but since this is a reflex, we don't actually have to go to the brain. We can do all of the interneuron processing right here in the spinal cord, and then send a message out through a motor neuron to cause an effect. In the case of a pin poking a finger, we can pull the hand back and away. So another example would be like the hot stove. Right? If you accidentally touch a hot stove, we have receptors that determine that it's very, very hot and damage is happening. That signal gets sent along a sensory neuron to your spinal cord. Your spinal cord processes that information and sends information along a motor neuron to pull your hand back and away from the stove. This is all going to happen extremely quickly. Again, you're not necessarily consciously aware that it hurts until you're already in the middle of pulling your hand back. Again, we are bypassing the brain, and that's going to allow for a faster response. This is especially important for something that might cause damage to our bodies. Now let's look at the autonomic division. The The autonomic system is dealing with involuntary muscles, so things like your heart muscle, the muscle of your organs like your digestive tract and glands. So things that you normally don't have control over are being regulated by the autonomic system. And we have two divisions of the autonomic system. One of these might sound familiar. We have the sympathetic division, also known as fight or flight, and the parasympathetic division, which can also be determined as the rest and digest division. So you're probably familiar with the term fight or flight. Right? Something happens, you're walking in the dark, you hear that rustling in the bushes, you start to feel your heart rate go up, you start to feel your breathing go up, your eyes widen, you look around. The reason that that's all happening is because your body is preparing for a potentially dangerous situation. You may have to fight or run away from whatever danger is lurking in the bushes. Versus rest and digest, which is the opposite. There is no danger. We can relax. Heart rate doesn't have to be very high. Breathing can slow down, and other functions can remain normal. We can increase things like digestion during the rest and digest phase. So let's look at this. So we have two different neurotransmitters involved. We have acetylcholine and norepinephrine. Depending on what is happening, whether it's the fight or flight, the sympathetic division, or the rest and digest parasympathetic division, different things are going to happen with our body. Now, we're not going to go through this entire figure, but we can at least look at a couple things. So, in the sympathetic division, your fight or flight, some things we're already familiar with. Your heartbeat increases. Your breathing increases. But some other things you might not be recognizing are happening with your body are things like you start salivating less. Your liver is releasing glucose. Your kidneys and stomach and pancreas are being inhibited in terms of doing their activities. So if you think about it, if I were to tell you that I was going to put you in charge of the remainder of this class, you would feel probably pretty terrified. Your heart rate would go up, you'd feel very panicked, maybe your mouth would get a little dry, you'd have a little cotton mouth. All of that would be part of the fight or flight response. On the parasympathetic side, the rest and digest side, we're stimulating salivation, we're slowing down the heart rate, we're slowing down the breathing, and we're increasing digestive activities. So they're basically the opposites of each other. We have a quick way to respond to dangerous situations if need be, and also a fast way to start to relax when the danger is gone.